Tonight, I want to talk about uh, difficult emotions, such as anger or grief, or and sort of how can we hold our experience when those experiences can be really difficult. And I think that this is really important for a couple of reasons. One, I think, we come to practice and we think, oh, I'm going to feel better, or that I'm suffering, and if I practice, and if I practice diligently, and we start to create these ideas in our head about what it means to practice, what the results of that practice are supposed to be, and then we use that as some kind of tool to sort of grade and judge ourselves. I think that this is particularly prominent in a culture in which white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy all kind of work together to convince us that our worth is based on production. And the worth of something that we do is based on the results that we get out of it. And I want to challenge that a little bit, because I want us to think about practice in a different way. What if we practice because that's what we do? What if what if there wasn't a reason? We just practiced. What would happen if my perspective on things changed so that I began to just do what I do, and that my worth came from my existence and not from production? What are the requirements to live in such a way, right? And so when we start to look at our practice as, so I practice a form of Americanized Japanese Buddhism. And the founder of our school in Japan went to China in his, he really had this question about if we're already enlightened, because in the Mahayana school, we believe that we are already enlightened. And his question was, if we're already enlightened, if we already have everything we need, why do we practice? And in his quest to sort of get that question answered, he went to China. There had been forms of Zen and Buddhism in Japan for a while, several hundred years. But he found something different in China. And to the best of my understanding at this stage in my development, his answer was, because that's what Buddhas do. Like, we cultivate compassion because that's what Buddhas do. We meditate to help us to create the mind that is flexible enough to develop compassion, right? We start to try and come into contact with some honest experience of ourselves that that exists sort of outside of our opinions about it, outside of our judgments about it, outside of even our socializations about it. What happens when I just think, oh, I'm angry. Okay. What's that like? Instead of thinking, oh, I'm not a good Buddhist because I'm angry, or, oh, I should practice compassion harder because I got angry at this thing, or, going to the other extreme, and I'm totally justified in my anger because of blah, 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 right? Like whatever it is, we all, good or bad or indifferent, we automatically sort of take every experience we have and we start to compartmentalize it in and make opinions about it and create stories. And we can notice this if we notice, like, I have a feeling, and then I have a feeling about my feeling, and then I have a feeling about my feelings about my feelings. And eventually I'm so far removed from the actual experience that I can't even get back to what's an appropriate response. And so we sit down on the cushion and we start to just notice, oh, what's it like to be me? What happens in my body when I'm angry? Where do I feel it? What is the nature of that feeling, that experience in my body? Or if I'm grieving, if I'm really sad, what's it like? Can I drop my stories about things long enough to just turn back in and have the experience I'm having, even for just a moment? And beautiful things begin to happen when we allow ourselves to be that flexible. And we practice this, right? Like we practice it when we have things that are easier to practice it with. When I'm feeling joyful, when I'm feeling ease in my life, can I start to notice, oh, this is what my body feels like when I feel at ease. This is what it feels like in my body. Like, oh, I notice my shoulders are looser. Maybe they're not so up around my ears. Oh, and my back seems to sort of be a little straighter. I'm not so hunched over. And I start to notice, oh, look, and my breath is deep. And it's not just up here in my chest. It's actually all the way down in my diaphragm. You know, we start with these things that are easy for us to pay attention to, so that when the things that are more difficult for us to pay attention to happen, we have this practice to turn back towards it and just think, oh, yeah, what's it like? What's this? And that's why when I meditate, that's why I sort of notice what my mind does, and I start to notice the thoughts that arise and which ones I want to follow, right? Which ones tend to distract me more. I notice the tapes that come up, especially if I've been sitting a long time, like I go on retreat. And if I sit for large portions of the day, I have lots of time to sort of watch the tapes play out in my head and notice all of the ways in which I've been socialized and trained and these programmed to just have responses that happen without even an awareness. But if I can slow down, I can start to have the ability to choose how I want to respond. I often say that there's nothing that you could feel or desire or want that's outside of the teachings, because it's not about what, it's about how, right? Anger becomes a problem when I respond to it without thinking, when I let it drag me around from place to place. Instead of going, oh, you know what? I'm really angry. Why am I angry? Oh, because that was not right. I just saw this thing happen and it's not right. Oh, maybe I need to make a boundary here, or maybe I need to check in with this person and find out what they're thinking. It's not about like, oh, I'm bad, I'm angry. What a bad Zen priest I am. What a bad monk, right? It's just, okay, just I'm a human being. I have this experience. And the real practice comes into, now what? I remember the first time, so I'd been practicing for about 8 or 9 years before I found my way in Zen. And I remember the very first Zen retreat I ever sat. It was 3 weeks. Um, and, uh, and at the end of the 3 weeks was this period of time, 7 days, called a sesshin, in which it really was intense. You basically sat for about 11 hours a day. And every time I would sit down on the cushion, I would start to cry. And we're not talking the nice, gentle, romantic tears down the side of your face. I'm talking snot bubbles, weeping. And as soon as the bell would ring, it would just stop. And the first time I thought, oh, well, that's really interesting. But then we sat down again and it happened and it happened every time I sat down. And I went to the person who became my teacher and I just said, I don't understand. And I hate to be disturbing everybody and, oh, I'm so sorry. And I don't even know what's causing this. And like I had all of this stuff about like how it wasn't okay. And he just said, well, what's wrong with that? What if you just cried? Like, obviously, there's something going on. Like, obviously, your body mind is having an experience. How about if we don't control that? Nobody's offended because you're sobbing in the zendo, the meditation hall. And I said, well, somebody brought Kleenex to my seat. And he said, yeah, because they want to make sure that you're taken care of. And I got blown away by that. And it gave me permission and a realization that, oh, this is a place I can start to just know myself. And I think that's what practice gives us. If there's anything that we can get from practice, especially if we do it consistently, is we get to know ourselves and what it's like to be us in this life, in the bodies we have, with the histories we have, with the traumas we have, with the griefs we have, with the hurts we have, all of it. Anybody who's heard me speak before knows that I suffer from pretty severe depression and anxiety on occasion. And I used to go into my teacher and I'd be like, I'm really struggling with my depression these days, la, la, la. And he goes, well, why don't you just quit struggling with it? Be depressed. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing anything. Like, just be depressed. Take care of your body when it's depressed. And we do the things necessary to take care of ourselves in those moments, right? So when my body needed to rest, I would rest. And when I would remember to take my medication and I remembered to go to therapy. And when I couldn't remember those things, I had people in my life who would remind me. There was a couple of months period where I've had a few friends that I've had for like 30 years. And I had about 2 or 3 months where they called me twice a day to just say, did you take your pills? And they would say, do you need help taking your pills? How about if I hang on the phone and we'll do it together? When I stopped making it a problem, it was so much easier to take care of myself in those moments. It was so much easier to make space. And then as I began to make space, the other thing that happened is that I started to hear what those things were telling me. Like I started to know what they needed, what my grief needs. And it's never the same. But when I'm quiet and I'm not judging myself and not making a problem out of something that's not a problem, it can then, if I'm paying attention to it, if I'm listening to it, it begins to tell me, oh, this is what I need. This is how you can attend to me. I would love to say that I do this perfectly every day, and I'm not. I have lots of times when I have to realize, oh, I was just so reactive today. Oh, I was so hard on myself today. Okay, let's go to bed. We'll start over tomorrow. Because it's not ever the same. In Zen, we often say you can't cross the same river twice. We also say fall down 8 times, get up, or fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's not about doing it perfectly or doing it right. You never will get an A in practice. Just practice because that's what Buddhas do. You are Buddha. You are already enlightened. You have everything you need. That's why when I come in here, I ask us to share our wisdom together. Because even though my mouth is moving, we're all giving this talk. Because that's how this works. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your practice. I thank you for your wisdom. I thank you for bringing ease to my heart today.